Have you ever wondered what's the relationship between carbonated drinks and happiness? How come emotions infiltrate so openly and naturally advertisements of science and technology products? Who decides what happiness is and what it looks like? This video will begin to examine those questions by focusing on how emotions, when attached to various technologies, set limits on the kinds of futures and values to which we can aspire. You may have heard that new innovations in products of science and technology merely tap into existing desires, anxieties, and emotions that drive the development of those products. However, much of scientific and technological products are not merely there just to fill a gap for the consumer, but to create a gap. This gap is often created as desires and emotions are instilled, manipulated, and managed by marketing companies. Consider, for example, face recognition technologies and sentiment analysis algorithms that constantly mine our emotions online for economic and profitable exchanges. The Facebook Emotional Contagion Study is but one example of how companies manipulate our emotions, in this case without even our consent, to generate data that would help them in further developing their products. To learn more about the Facebook Emotional Contagion Study, stop the present video and click on the YouTube link in the description section. In this example, we cannot dismiss how emotions are stakeholders, what we're calling emotive actants, that form part of a network intended to make companies more profitable. Emotions are no longer benign, private, and personal feelings, but they become public and invested in market-driven economies and their associated visions for the futures. Such emotive actants, for instance, every like or happy face that you make to a post, work to support visions of desirable futures or socio-technical imaginaries that include, for instance, connectedness or having a voice. However, we should be cautious, as those visions or socio-technical imaginaries delimit and overdefine what connectedness should mean, all while ensuring that profit-making companies continue to take advantage of the consumer through targeted ads and unconsensual participation in market research. Emotive actants could be traced to digital technologies and non-digital technologies. In the following slides, we illustrate emotive actants in relation to self-tracking devices as a digital technology and cosmetics when it comes to non-digital technologies. Let's look at how emotive actants play a role as part of digital technologies. Consider the example of self-tracking technologies. One of the problematic issues with this technology relate to surveillance, bias, and targeted use towards specific groups for control. Here, the emotive actants of fear, a fear from the other, is deployed as part of larger networks that include such surveillance technologies. This could be the specific case of a surveillance app by the name of SmartLink. According to a recent Guardian article that's hyperlinked in the description section below, the SmartLink app is now being used to control almost 22,000 immigrants. It was developed by BI Incorporated, a company that initially designed GPS ankle monitors. BI has links to another institution called Geo Group, which is one of the major prison and detention companies that have profited from a dramatic expansion of prisoner and detained population in the US over the past 4 decades. The app is also supported by nationwide telecom providers Sprint and Verizon, with movement tracking provided by Google Maps. Those monitoring technologies, such as the GPS ankle monitors and the surveillance app, legitimize something called terror capitalism. Terror capitalism justifies the exploitation of subjugated populations by defining them as potential terrorists or security threats. This could be the case of US immigrants and asylum seekers, Muslims Uyghurs in concentration camps in China, and other stateless groups such as Bengalis in northeast India and Palestinian Arabs. Through building on feelings of fear from the other, terror capitalism primarily generates profit in 3 interconnected ways. First, lucrative state contracts are given to private corporations to build and deploy policing technologies that survey and manage target groups. Then, using the vast amount of biometric and social media data extracted from those groups, the private companies improve their technologies and sell retail versions of them to other states and institutions. Finally, all this turns the target groups into a ready source of cheap labor, either through direct coercion or indirectly through stigma. Through terror capitalism, self-monitoring technologies extend and legitimize socio-technical imaginaries premised on safety, national security, who is a citizen, and as a result, who is not a citizen. At the same time, we can begin to trace how such technologies of surveillance capitalize on fears and terrors in different parts of the world, and that such technologies could become involved in acts of discrimination and stigmatization against particular groups. Let's consider now an example of non-digital technologies, the case of foundation and cosmetics. This is an actor network map done by students on the topic. Notice how stakeholders related to this issue could be human, non-human, and positive messages. But positive messages may not be necessarily positive. For instance, what does it mean to be happy with cosmetics for the different stakeholders involved? Whose happiness matters? How companies and consumers' happiness converge to limit the happiness of others. Here we can think of the damaged landscapes, issues with animal testing, and the workers who develop such technologies in unsafe working conditions. Happiness here is an emotive actant. Happiness extends to visions of desirable futures or socio-technical imaginaries advanced by cosmetics related to human well-being, human beautification, and nature being in service of humans. In your Research and Informed Negotiated Action project, try to research existing cosmetics, and maybe you can even produce your own cosmetics that could ensure happiness of the various stakeholders involved. To start applying those new concepts that you're learning about here, check this video on emotional technology. A link is provided to this video in the description section below. The video refers to technologies that read our emotions for different purposes: the mood reader, the spouse finder, and the career locator. As you watch the video, brainstorm the different socio-technical imaginaries that are supported through those technologies. If you need help, check the description section for some possible ideas related to the socio-technical imaginaries that are supported by this technology. Begin to put together all those ideas and others that you research into a network map. Imagine that this technology is already here. Can you design a hypothetical survey to bring attention to some of the issues surrounding those technologies? How would you interrupt such socio-technical imaginaries? What kinds of action could you take? What regulations would you push for? How would you use those technologies in counterproductive ways to their original intended aims? How would you make sure that those technologies would not contribute to an increased technological divide between developed and developing countries?